Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me today on this 102nd episode of Hashtag No Limits. Hashtag No Limits is about people whose society has placed limits upon, but who have busted through those limits. I believe 100% that we know who we are, but not who we will be, as Ophelia says in Hamlet. And I believe that there isn't a better example than the caterpillar turning into the butterfly. The caterpillar, if you don't know, it literally dissolves into its cells and then it reforms into the butterfly. And if that isn't challenging enough, it then has to struggle to get out of the cocoon in order for its wings to be strong enough to fly. I am your host, Shelly Kino. I didn't say that at the beginning. And today I have with me Dennis and Jen Sturgeon, and they're going to share about their amazing children and their own stories of all the things that their kids have busted through, but that they, as parents, through this special education, have busted through as well. So, Dennis and Jen, thank you so much for joining me. How are you guys?
Good. How about yourself?
I'm
Very
doing
great.
well,
Thank
thanks.
you.
Yeah. So tell us a little bit. You can each take turns telling a little bit about yourselves, and then if you want to divvy up the kids, or if you just want to talk about them in general, as to a little bit about the whole family.
Okay, well, we met in high school, so we're high school sweethearts. We've been together over 20 years. We have six children together, three girls, three boys. Our oldest is Abigail. She is a senior this year. And then our next kiddo we have is Zachary, who is a sophomore this year. And then our next kiddo is Rebecca Sturgeon, and she's a freshman. And then we have Gracie, who is a seventh grader, Nicholas, who is a fourth grader, and Jacob, who is a fifth grader. So we have three boys and three girls. We have a very busy family life, of course. We have three kids currently in soccer right now, so we're keeping busy with that. Um, what else would you like to add?
We stay pretty busy with all of them. They all always have something going on. I'm sure you can imagine, especially those age ranges.
Yeah.
You would think it'd be easier when they were younger because you're not doing so much, but at the same time, it it, it it's not easier. It's tough. You're always staying busy, and always going.
Yeah. And I would think with that whole age difference between your senior and your, was it fourth grader, third
Yeah.
grader? Fourth grader. Yeah, I mean, you would hope that the older ones are helping out with the younger ones, but then the older ones have their own things and they're off doing their things. And so that doesn't always work. So there's just, I'm sure, I only have one, but even parenting styles had to change as she got older. And so I'm sure with six, it's always changing and you're always learning new things and figuring out new ways to do different things. And so, kudos to you. And I do want to let the audience know that we are friends. Dennis and I work together. And so I see some of the Facebook posts that you guys make on some of your fun family outings and vacations and things. And you guys look like a very wonderful family that you are all very much into spending time with one another. And that doesn't always happen in today's society. And so it always warms my heart to see his photos out there and the different things. So, are the kids pretty typical in how they get along with each other, or are they always at each other's throats, or is there one who's sort of always the outcast one and everybody else kind of gangs up on that one? Or how does that work?
Yeah, so I mean, when you see the Facebook pictures, of course, that's the glamorous side. You don't get to see all
Yeah.
the videos or we don't take videos or pictures of when they're fighting because obviously they fight. They fight a lot. They're brothers and sisters, so yeah, there's a lot going on at all times. As for like teaming up and that kind of stuff, for the most part, I mean they not really. I mean, you do see like a closer relationship with some more so than others, but at the same time, you don't know who's going to be fighting with who because they might be best friends now, and then 5 minutes from now they're dad, mom, so and so did this, so and so did that. So
Right.
you do a lot of refereeing when you have that many.
Yeah, I would think that would happen quite often. Yeah. So what is it that brings you guys to hashtag no limits? Who is it that you're going to talk about today? And I mentioned at the onset that you guys have learned and busted through some limits going through this whole special education process. So let's talk about some of those things. Is it child number 2 or child number 3 that you started into the world of special education, or was it child number 5?
It was Jacob, child
So
number
Okay.
5, yeah, who's in
Yeah.
5th grade now currently, yeah.
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 So so uh, so with Jacob, obviously by the time we had Jacob, well, anybody that's a parent's going to say that, you learn something new with every kid, and
Mhm.
on top of that, it's like you never know everything you can do whenever you're a parent, because there's always something more that you can do or something that you shouldn't be doing that you are doing, so on and so forth. But with Jacob, I think almost immediately we could tell that there was something just different about Jacob, in the sense that he was unique in a certain kind of way. And I think it was really obvious whenever, as a newborn, and then really up and through many years, he didn't really sleep. And that was the one thing that kind of really caught us, was like he just didn't sleep. He was always awake and aware, and just kind of, as a baby, he was eyes always open, eyes always on you, looking here, looking there. He wasn't like colicky or anything. He was just always watching. Then
Oh,
as he got a
wow.
little bit older and he could move around, that no sleeping also turned into never sitting still. So he was always just on the
On the
move.
go,
Yeah.
yeah.
And then it was just like little things that we caught on to. Like he didn't walk, as like quick as our other kids. He didn't talk as quick as our other kids. Potty training didn't go as well as our other kids. Everything was just that, there was just that delay that was there with him. So we caught on to that. And then it was, when did he start pre-K? Was it 4 years old?
He was 3.
So
He went
three?
to because he went to preschool 2 years, so he was 3, and he wasn't fully potty trained yet. So that was another thing. We did have to send pull-ups to school, and that was kind of making that arrangements with the school that that would be okay and things like that. There are a few times he did have accidents at school as well. Then, so we started catching on more. Then as
Yeah.
time was going on, that he was taking a while to be potty trained.
By that age, he still wasn't really verbalizing. He was still, I think we caught on to what he wanted whenever he wanted it, because we knew his, I guess, movements and all that good stuff. Plus, he would make certain noises for things, but he wasn't
Very talkative,
verbalizing. Yeah,
yeah.
he just
He
wasn't.
didn't.
And so we started looking into,
Which, I'm sorry, I laughed now because I know how verbal he is now.
Yes.
So
yeah, yeah, and
it
that's and
seems kind of odd that he wasn't talking,
Yeah.
yeah, and I'm gonna bring that up here in a little bit, because that's something that's pretty amazing how that works
Yeah.
out. But at the at the at that time, like, it was still one of those things where it was like, kind of what's the deal type thing. We had already had 4 kids, and for the, I mean, granted, nothing's normal, but for the most part, they were kind of that normal childhood, that everything was going straight. School, when they started, it was fine. There was really nothing that threw up any, like, warnings or anything, like, hey, maybe there's something a little bit different here. But with Jacob, we had that. So whenever he started pre-K, that was whenever, yeah, we realized there was something really that was not up to par. And so we started looking into, that was about the time that we started, like, with occupational therapy and
Yes, he was
speech
going to
therapy.
occupational therapy in O'Fallon. And he went there for a couple of years.
Yeah.
Dennis was a stay-at-home dad during that time, so he took him there every week. That he was going. He had to go. Wasn't it twice a week?
Twice a week. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And he was, still at that time there. We didn't have an IEP or anything at that time, because we had just started pre-K. But again, we knew there was something a little off. But what we were told was, it could just be a social thing, and once we get him started in school, then he'll just kind of fall in with the other peers, and everything will kind of smooth out. So we're like, okay, maybe that's what's going on. Again, we were completely new to this. We had never dealt with this. So that went on for a little bit, until eventually it turned into like he would never sit still at school. He would it seemed like every day we were getting a call about something new that Jacob had done, whether it was hitting, biting, taking, not waiting his turn, not waiting in line, and it was just constant. It's like, okay, it got to the point where it's like, okay, we get it. Like we get it. We understand there's a struggle here. We're dealing with it too, but
Right.
we get it.
Right.
And I think it was probably around that time whenever we first really started um, hearing about like an individualized education plan and everything. We still didn't really know what it was because again, we never dealt with it. But then uh, what they needed like a diagnosis and things like that to find out whether or not he did qualify for it. And we got so we followed through with all those steps. Took him to his pediatrician who diagnosed him with a PDD NOS,
Okay.
pervasive developmental. Is that right?
Yep. Pervasive developmental disorder not otherwise specified.
Yeah, yeah. And then we started looking at that, and we're like, okay, yeah, we're seeing this, we're seeing this, we're seeing this, we're seeing this. Um, and then it was also at that time. So that was what went on his IEP. Let me back up. That was what went on his IEP. That was the reason he got his IEP was that. Um, there was also still the he constantly on the move, constantly on the move, and they didn't really attribute that to the PDD-NOS, but at the same time they didn't want to at the time the pediatrician didn't want to like put any other labels there,
On him, yeah.
so
Mm-hmm.
we stuck with that one, got an IEP. Still stuck with taking him to occupational therapy. I think we knocked it back to once a week at that time, and then doing speech therapy, and then we started doing speech therapy with school, so on and so forth. Uh, and then first, so that would have been he did pre-kindergarten 2 years.
Mm-hmm.
So then it would have been his third year of school is when he started kindergarten, and it was at that time that we found out that things like occupational therapy and speech therapy, and really any of those types of needs could be fulfilled by the school. And the way that we found that out was reaching out, talking like I was talking with this therapist. I was doing a lot of research. Google's amazing. It can lead you down some weird stuff, but at the same time,
Yes, again.
it'll give you a lot of pointers. And we
Right.
started getting books. Like we had like back here, there's probably like I don't know, probably 5 or 6 IEP, just strictly IEP books. Um, and really just teaching ourselves like what is it that he's entitled to help him out, what is it that he's not,
Right.
so on and so forth. And I don't want to say it turned into a battle to make sure that he got stuff, but it was definitely one of those things where the more I learned about it, the more I'd push for things and say, hey, how come we're not doing this, or how come we're not offering this, or so on and so forth. So in a way it did kind of turn into a battle a little bit, and then I'd learn something new and I'd battle for that, and then yeah.
Yeah,
um,
and I'm gonna pause you for a second because I just want to clarify a few things that you said. So we're talking only about 8 years ago, if I did the math right, as to when he was starting the pre-kindergarten era, and you said that they told you he had to have a diagnosis of something in order to qualify.
Yeah, they. I think what it was, if I remember correctly, I don't know if they said it like that, but they needed something to put on there as a reason as to why he would qualify for an IP. Yeah, they did essentially say that. Um,
Okay, because that's not technically true. And I find that interesting that as recent as 8 years ago that was still being said, because actually having a diagnosis of something does not guarantee getting an IEP, and requiring a diagnosis, um, they may have owed you some money for that, because making you go to a doctor and getting a diagnosis, um, depending on how they worded it, it could have been that they should have paid for that. Um, but there were other things, like they could have given him a developmental delay. He could have qualified under other health impaired. At that age, there are a few different ways, a few different things that he could have qualified for. And so I just that really shocked me when you said that you needed to, that they told you that you needed to have a diagnosis of something in order for him to qualify. And then I found it very sad that the school wasn't talking to you about related services such as occupational therapy or speech therapy, because he absolutely could have gotten those things as early as preschool had you known and recognized that, you know, something was amiss. That's not even the right word, that something was different about him than your other children. He could have had services from 0 to 3, not provided by his public school, but there are 0 to 3 services. And then for him to be in school and for them to not say, oh, you know, there's occupational therapy and that might be able to help him with X, Y, and Z. And oh, maybe some speech therapy. That really bothers me.
No, that's okay. And I think it bothered us too.
It did.
And
It really did. That was one of the hardest things, was not knowing what, you know, he all qualified for, what we should do, you know, what direction to go from there. I think in kindergarten he was still going 1 day a week and you were still taking him, but I can't remember for sure.
Yeah, I think
And
it was
then that's when we found out later that he, you know, could get those services at school, because we honestly didn't know at that time until, you know, I don't know how we
kind of like
actually,
we found it out in
yeah,
a way, and we had to bring it up and we had to push for it. And I think once we brought it up and pushed for it, there wasn't a lot of pushback, but at the same time, it was kind of one of those things that you would think would just be offered. The information would be offered to you instead of you having to go out and find that information.
exactly.
Right.
And
Yeah.
you know, you mentioned the 0 to 3 thing. That was something else that you know, later, you know, hindsight's always 2020, and obviously looking back, we always did these. I don't even know what you call them, but you essentially would take the kids to the gym. They test their vision, they test their hearing, they like do all of that stuff. You do it. I mean, they'd be like small. I remember doing it when they were like, now they're all grown up, you know, in their own way. But
Yeah.
I remember doing it when they were small, and yeah, even at that time, I mean, it wasn't like he would go there and put on a show and it'd be like, oh, you know, he seems fine to me. Like it was still they were seeing the same exact stuff that we were seeing, but it was never mentioned to us. So, and again, like it was one of those things where we had no idea that there was programs out there that worked with kids at that age or anything like that.
Right.
And uh, and to clarify, like I don't know if the school, like, just so I can clarify, I don't know how they specifically said it about the going out and get the diagnosis, but I do remember it was at that time that we did go get the diagnosis whenever we were trying to get the IEP and all that stuff. I can't remember if they said, you know, you have to go do it or recommend it. I mean, this is
Right.
like
Yeah.
8 years ago, but I do know that was the time that we went out and did it. Um, and another thing about like Jacob with everything going on was getting him involved in the services that we took him to, and it wasn't in the school. By doing that, it was great because it showed us a lot of stuff that we didn't know that like to work with Jacob on. So it wasn't all just like in no way was it like any like a bothersome or anything. I mean, sure, it was inconvenient because we had to go all the way to, you know, Fallon or Shiloh 2 days a week, and we lived by St. Rose. But at the same time, we learned a lot from the therapist that he worked with and things like that. And I don't know if we would have learned that from another therapist. Like if he was doing that at school, we probably wouldn't have learned it because we wouldn't have been there and having to
Right.
talk with them every single time and that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Outside therapy is absolutely a wonderful thing, but the services in the school are allowed as well and probably should have been provided starting earlier than what they were. But so he's so I kind of interrupted you when you were like, he's in kindergarten now. So we'll start over or reconvene there. So he's in kindergarten and you've started so he's starting to get services at the kindergarten at late age. I can't talk.
He is, and it's also at this time where things kind of started getting interesting in the sense that it seemed like it was overnight, and it was around the age of 4. So it might essentially, he was either in the second year of pre-K or like going into kindergarten or somewhere in that transition. It was like overnight. We said that, you know, Jacob wasn't potty trained or He would have all these accidents. He was not talking.
He didn't make eye contact as
And we still
well.
struggle with that. And it's one of those struggles where it's just like, you don't want to look at us, that's fine. There's times we don't want to look at you. No, I'm joking, um, but what I was gonna say was like overnight, it seemed like he just started talking, and he would just, and like you said, he's a massive talker now. Sometimes you're just like,
Yeah.
Jacob, take it down, buddy. We just
Right.
slow. um, but it really was. It seemed like it was just overnight. He just kind of went from that dude making noises, pointing, and he was like, no, use your words. So all of a sudden, bam, he's just, hey, I want a cup of milk. And of course, it wasn't that smooth, but at the same time,
Right.
it was a big transition from this caveman type thing to carrying on words.
Yeah.
And then the
And
same
that's
thing on
that's such
the
a
life
such a
thing.
cool thing because sorry, I just wanted to say this that's such a cool thing because that's just one more proof that just because somebody's nonverbal, it's not that they're not hearing, it's not that they're not comprehending, it's not that they don't have anything to say.
Right.
And he's a great example of that he understood when you talked to him and when his siblings he watched his siblings asking for things and he was I mean I don't know this personally but I'm imagining he was catching everything that was going on in his environment and it was just a matter of whatever needed to happen to click to be able to make the verbal come out. um, it was all in there. And as soon as he could, you didn't have to teach him a lot of things. Like you said, he asked you for something or he knew what things were by name. And that's because of all the talking that had been going on around him. And so that's just a great reason. And hopefully anyone who is listening is like, oh yeah, okay. I'm not going to talk baby talk
Right.
because I'm sure you weren't talking baby talk around him or to him.
No,
And just
we pushed him to express words too during that time.
right.
You want milk? Ask for milk. We wouldn't hamper on it. Be like, we're not giving it to you until you ask. But at the same time, we would encourage that. As we're pouring
Right.
it, we got to ask for this, that type of stuff. Sorry to cut it.
No, you're okay. Yeah. So keep going. So yeah, it was just I just wanted to really encourage any parents who might be listening who may have even an older child than what he was when he started talking. Don't stop talking to them. Keep talking around them, having conversations around them in your normal tone of voices and talk to them. I know it's sometimes uncomfortable because you don't necessarily get words back, but communication isn't all words either.
Right.
So always try to have those conversations and just talk about the environment, talk about what you're doing, talk, especially when they're younger and you're wanting to teach them those kinds of things like, oh, I'm getting the gallon of milk and I'm opening the lid and I'm getting the glass to pour it into and just kind of walk through all of that stuff. And because you're teaching them, even though it may not seem necessarily that they're listening.
Right.
Yeah, and I was gonna go into things got a little bit more interesting, especially with the school once you get to kindergarten. But going off of that, like if there was one piece of advice I could give to myself back then, it was like, hey, you're doing the right thing here. Keep talking to him because Jacob also had this sense where whenever you would talk to him and he wasn't able to verbalize, he would give you this blank stare, and and it would really make you question, are you getting what I'm telling you? And it was just this constant, you know, of this just blankness. And we just kept doing it though. So I think, if the parents that are dealing with that, if you are getting that blank stare, you just got to continue on because, like you said, I mean, they are Jacob, perfect example. He was listening. He heard a lot of things and he knew what he wanted to say. He just wasn't ready to do it yet, I guess, for whatever
Yeah.
reason.
Yep, exactly.
But going to kindergarten, I think that's where things got interesting in the sense that now you're going to a classroom setting as opposed to, pre-K. It's like, stations and you're playing here, you're playing with this, you're playing with that. Kindergarten, you get a desk, you get around a group of kids, and you don't get the freedom. There's a lot more structure.
And it's also all day from
Yep.
pre-K being like just only 3 hours.
Right.
It was a major adjustment for him, and then to also have nap time there as well.
And that was when the school first realized that Jacob don't sleep. It was
Yeah.
nap time. Found that out when we would get these calls and stuff. Still, his now the teachers that he worked with, of course, they were great. But at the same time, this is where we started pushing for things in the IEP. Like one of the things was, Jacob won't stay at his desk. Jacob, won't stay at his designated spot at the carpet, things like that. So that's where we started pushing with like the accommodations, and we started finding out, oh, you can build it around them. And so this is where we was like, okay, he won't stay at his desk. How about we just make it to where he has to stay around his desk? He can stand up as long as he's not bothering nobody, pushing anybody, throwing anything like that. It's not hurting anybody. I think a lot of people do that. They have like stand up desks now and everything. Some people just like to stand. And
Right.
so that was whenever I say that that's when things got interesting, because I think it was because that was when we started to really push for stuff.
More,
yeah.
yes. And realize that there is help at school, and we realized a lot more just learning on our own, talking to different people, things like that.
Yep.
That there's more resources that they could be providing for us.
Yeah, and I think it might have been kindergarten when he started getting aid in the room?
I think so.
I think
This
it was,
doesn't
too.
say, because he had a one-on-one aid all the way
Yeah.
up to fourth grade
yeah,
for
fourth
a
grade
little
last year.
while, and then they kind of took the aid out of the room, I think halfway, totally throughout, in the middle of it, because he was doing much better. So now he's middle school. Yeah.
Yeah. And that was where so we have this aid and things like that. And then things got a little messy with Jacob, in the sense that the school went through a lot of transition. They changed administrators, they changed special education teacher, they changed the aide that he was with.
Right.
There's a lot of change going on for him. And Jacob, one of the other things with Jacob is
he likes structure.
Yeah, he thrives on it. Like
the same thing.
Yeah, and like for example, with the bus picking, because my kids go to religion every morning, so they get picked up for school at like 6:55ish in the morning, and Jacob he sets his alarm for 5:45, and I'm always like, Jacob, you don't need that much time to get ready. I mean, like, sleep till like 6:10, 6:15, even 6:30. Like, it's more sleep.
Right.
But he does need that much time because he likes to get up. He likes to like just be kind of at it, moving, doing things. This morning he wanted to make breakfast, so he made cinnamon rolls, and it's just a matter of
he did.
Yeah,
he loves to make them too.
Yeah, and that's that structure. Like if we would say I would go in his room and like change his alarm clock at night or something or anything like that, and I set it for like 6:10, that could set his whole day off.
Yes.
Because
just one small thing, yeah.
And that's something that we've talked about more recently in our IEP meetings, is like the tiniest thing could, like, that happens in the morning could just ruin his entire day. And so it's that structure, like, things go this way, so they're going to go this way, they're going to go this way, they're going to go this way. And we just adjust to it. Like, instead of being like, you can't have everything your way, that kind of stuff. It's one of those pick your battles. Is it easier to just kind of be like, all right, you want to get up at that time, get up at that time. Just don't be running around the house screaming, because you're gonna have remember, he's got siblings. They're gonna be like, Jacob, shut up, stuff like that. And then we're waking up, we're like, oh great, now our day's ruined because we're waking up to this.
Right.
But it's a matter of just kind of we've learned to pick our battles more so with Jacob than a lot of the other kids, because it is kind of like, it's not hurting anybody to be up at that time. He really doesn't need a lot of sleep anyways. I mean, I guess all kids do, but at the same time, he doesn't. He does fine when he doesn't sleep that much. So it's kind of like, kudos to you, buddy. You want to get up there and get started?
Yeah. You want to get up and make me breakfast every morning? You go right ahead.
Oh, I need to get him enrolled in some of those online classes where they show you how to make all kinds of unique stuff.
Yeah, there you go.
One of those Gordon Ramsay things you can start making.
Yeah. They have kids cooking shows, that's for sure.
Right.
Yeah.
He's the physician did have to put him on medication though to sleep, because he would, with school and not being able to sleep, so he is on a medication, two medications for sleeping. Um, and he's realizing more as we go on, hey, why am I going to, see this teacher? Hey, why am I taking this medicine? Like, because he takes a morning pill, and then he takes 2 pills at night to go to sleep. So he's really catching on to those things, especially this year.
Asking a lot of questions.
Oh yeah, a lot more questions about things, and why do I go to speech therapy, and just all of those questions, wanting to know why.
Yeah, which is all great, because he's becoming self-aware, but at the same time, you're like, oh, now he's starting to see, and he's starting to, and it, I mean, I don't know, but it, might be bothering him. Like, I don't want to be different. And, so that's something now that your family will have to adjust and figure out how to take care of that need that he has to be okay with being different.
Right.
Yeah, and we do see that already. It's kind of like you can tell that he gets like, but how do I explain this? It also pushes him more. Like at school, okay, school's a perfect example. You can tell that, like Jennifer said, he's at that point where he's asking these questions. How come I got to go to this teacher? How come I have to go, and do this? How come I have to go and do that? But now, we just had an IEP meeting for him, what, 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
2 weeks ago, and we're getting these reports from the teachers. He's doing this, he's doing that, and Jacob's telling us he's doing this, he's doing that. And one of the things is he's pushing more. And one of the, I can't remember what teacher was, but it was brought up that it helps that he doesn't want to have to leave the class to go and get like a test read to him and things like that, because nobody else is doing that. And so it's making him, I guess, push himself more. He's get this own, like, honestly, we don't mind it, and I'm sure well, I mean, I would hope the teachers don't mind it that he would have to go do that, but obviously he minds it a little bit, and that's fine. If he wants to make those changes, yeah, we'll be there for him to say,
right,
keep it up.
Yeah, the thing will be for him, and this is the case with any kids as they hit that middle school and high school, it is so very important to include them in the discussion about what accommodations and modifications they need, how those accommodations and modifications help them, and then whether they will actually use them. Because he, like we just said, he's at that age where it is going to become, or it could become, like a situation where he starts to get picked on because he's leaving, or he feels that kids are looking at him differently, whether they are or not. And so he may not want to stand out in that way. And the unfortunate part of that is that may make his grades suffer. And, he'll need to understand, and any kid who decides, that they don't want particular accommodations because it does make them stand out a little bit, then you all have to just come to that conclusion of how important are grades in life versus him being socially accepted and happy and content with who he is. And then if he's not going to use that accommodation, then it can be taken off of his IEP, because if it's on there, it has to happen. If it's not on there, then he can go on without it. But just making sure that he's included. So is that something that you guys have been doing, is including him prior, or is that something that you're definitely looking at doing now that he is starting to become aware of his differences?
He did come to one IEP meeting. I think it was last year. This year he did ask me, he goes, do I have to go to that meeting? He was talking about the IEP meeting. And I kind of just gave him the choice. I said, if you don't want to, you don't have to. It's up to you. And he acted like he didn't want to miss school. So we just kind of gave him the choice, because he did, like I said, last year sit in on that one that we had.
Yeah. That's good. And that's a tough spot. And it's not anything that I think I've really ever spoken to parents about on this show is like when you hit those kind of milestones, when they do recognize, and, you know, there will be a time when he gets to about 13 or 14 where he will be required to come to the IEP meeting. You know, and so having those conversations and going through that process of them accepting who they really are.
Right.
So yeah, that's interesting that he's right in the beginning stages of that right now, and that you guys are dealing with it. We'll have to have you come back on in like 5 years if I'm still doing this, and talk about how you got through it and what you had to do. And yeah,
right, exactly.
Yeah. So I know there was some times that when you pushed back on the school, it wasn't just, oh, I'm going to push back, and it was received well. Are you okay talking about some of those more difficult IEP meetings and what you learned from those?
Yeah. I could tell you what if I could give any advice to any like fathers or even mothers, like one of the things I learned was you have to keep a cool head. You're gonna get there's really no other way to say it. You're gonna get pissed off because there's gonna be things that are gonna be either be said that you doubt, or there's just gonna be kind of you don't always get your way, obviously. And then the thing I think that makes you mad is whenever you deal with people that give you that pushback. And a good example would be like there was a meeting that we went to, and this was fairly early on, and it was just in conversation wise as to like with him having an aide in the room. It was brought up about like finances of the school and about how they couldn't accommodate because of the finances. Well, that really irritated me because I knew that like by then I had done the research and I knew that had nothing to do with it. And I wanted to like say like stop, just like knock it off and things like that. But that's an example of you got to keep your cool. And we prevailed because I was able to say I don't feel like the finances impact anything. And I can't remember exactly how it went down, but essentially it was like that. And then there was another time where I did kind of lose my cool, and it was because the special ed teacher at the time was in the room, and whenever we were talking about accommodations, I was noticing her out of my peripheral, kind of like and like kind of like doing this, and I saw her like remember she looked at her watch or her phone or something, but it's kind of like one of those things where it's like you could tell that somebody's bothered because we're asking so many questions because we're trying to clarify things and things like that. And then she just kind of it just kind of pushed me over the edge whenever I heard her kind of like exhale heavily again. And as I turned, I like noticed that she was rolling her eyes. And so at that time I did lose my cool, and I just simply said, I'm sorry, are we taking up your time here? Or I can't remember exactly how it went, but I remember the teacher she turned like really red, and essentially the superintendent at the time said, why don't we take a break? And then of course I felt bad afterwards because it's like I didn't mean to like attack her, and it wasn't that calm. Obviously I was like a little bit more mad. I didn't curse or anything, but at the same time I was pretty upset. And so essentially what I was gonna get at was keeping your cool and dealing with that kind of stuff, and then just pushing for what's best for your kid and what is best for your kid, and knowing that while the school isn't maybe telling you everything you need to know or whatever it is, what you got to do is you really do got to like build a team, and you're going to have people on that team that you don't agree with, but sometimes you need that because they can keep you kind of in line with, like, hey, I get that you want that, but we can't do that. And, that's just something that cannot be done. You might disagree with that person. You might hate that person for saying that, but they might be right. And that's why it's good to have that team dynamic with the IEP. And eventually we got that built. And I think with Jacob, we have a great team at this point. But there were some tough times, I can't remember exactly where I was going with that, because I kind of got that's all going through my head now dealing with that lady. So
Well, and I don't know if you can pinpoint why it's such a difficult situation to be in for parents. Jen, I don't think you were at that meeting that he's talking about, but if you were,
he
like,
was there.
Yeah.
so
She
what
turned
was
red
it
too.
like? Like, why do you think it got to that point where it was so frustrating for both of you, but especially for Dennis at that point?
Well, I knew the meeting had went over the time period, and I think it was at the end of the day. The kids were getting out of school, so I don't know if the teacher was upset that she had to stay longer, or she had something that she had to be at, because she was making those noises, and you could tell she just was wanting it to be over. It just it makes you feel uncomfortable. It really does, in situations like that. And it's like, okay, well, we need to get this, agreed upon. We do need to, finish his IEP up and go through every single thing. So there was like a settle in the room, and then we talked to the principal outside of the room, to kind of talk things over a little bit more. But yeah, it was definitely intense.
Yeah. So tell me if you agree or disagree with this. Part of it is because you do feel like you have one meeting a year to get everything ironed out for the whole year.
Right.
And you have questions and you're trying to understand, and this is your pride and joy. This is your whole world. You actually have 6 whole worlds, but
Right.
But I mean, Jacob is, he's everything. And so, for I think for somebody to act as though it wasn't as important as you felt it was, I think that can be overwhelming and aggravating. And
Yes.
like I said, that you are trying to understand everything.
Right.
And
And,
so
we were still new to everything at the time as well. And I remember them, asking me all types of questions before he got the IEP, like, was he a term baby? Was he, preterm? Did you do drugs while you were pregnant, and all this other things? And I just remember trying to hide my tears, like, as they're asking these questions, because I'm like, I didn't do anything, different. There was nothing different that I done, with each pregnancy. I did not take any drugs. I did not drink, nothing. I was very good about that. So that's one of the things I just remember them interviewing and asking all those questions. And it kind of makes you feel like, how do I say, just, thinking about,
did I do something wrong as
right,
the mom?
exactly. Yeah.
What didn't I do that I could have done?
Right.
And I know exactly the questions that you're talking about. And I didn't know that this happened all across the country, but I thought maybe it was just something in the regions where I've worked. But there are those what I call the statistical questions.
Yeah.
And I think a lot of that statistical type questioning is to try to see, like patterns of, kids who ended up with whatever. As we've questioned the parent, we can see that the majority of these people were here during their pregnancy, or they consumed this, or they had this tragedy happen, or there's no pattern whatsoever. So I think a lot of that is to try to figure out, maybe I've never used any of that information. But I think that's what it was always collected for. It was somebody higher up than me that said, you have to collect this information. And it is, you have to talk about your whole the whole pregnancy, the birth, milestones, when they reach those milestones, or if they reach those milestones, who lives in the house, how many times you've moved, if you've moved, like all of that sort of stuff that, like, to me, as I said, is irrelevant for
Right.
actually educating the child, but
Right.
I think it's them getting that statistical information. But I could definitely see why it would make it seem like they're looking for somebody to blame or something to blame. And as the mom who's carried the baby, that's what we do. Oh, what did I do?
Right.
What didn't I do?
Exactly.
What could I have done? What should I have done? What shouldn't I have done?
Exactly. And that's when I left there. That's exactly what my thoughts were as I was leaving there. Like, I was just like, that's when it all kind of, triggered. It was just like, what did I do different? What should I have done better? And I mean, still every once in a while to this day, when I think about it, it does. It's just something about that is really,
Yeah. And do they still make you go through that every 3 years where they make you relive that? Or do they, because I think towards the end of my time of teaching, we could say same as initial or same as previous if nothing had, like, it was kind of like, has anything changed? Well, no, because all of that's already happened 10 years ago or 5 years ago.
right.
So no, nothing's changed in 3 years. So do they
I'm
still make you
trying.
answer all those questions for every triennial that he has?
So our triennial is actually next year, so that means that
Yeah.
it was
Oh, okay.
2 years ago.
And I
So
don't remember it then.
Maybe they didn't. Maybe they've already gotten to that point where you are, that they have said, okay, we know this is the birth history, and we got this when we did the initial, and nothing changed because he was
Right.
already born. So
Exactly.
obviously nothing's changing. So that's good. But yeah, I mean, I do hear parents talk about that all across the country, that once you get your child into special education, you have to tell the whole pregnancy, birth story a bazillion times.
Yes.
And
yeah, and I think one of the things with that's troublesome, is that, so that happens early on, and then so they're kind of building this impression that it's me against them, and then you really deal with that the entire time, because even we've got a great team now, but I mean, still, you show up and as you said, you and I, we work together in a professional capacity. So I've been to IEP meetings where I see that you get this very much impression where it's like the school against the parent. Maybe it's not supposed to be that way, and maybe the school don't want it to mean that way. But at the same time, if you're not blind, you do get that impression that it's like, you have 4 or 5 professionals that do this, 5 days a week for however long. And then you have a parent that has never dealt with anything like this before, and they're just simply just trying to look out for the best for their kid. And so as they're telling you stuff, a few things happen. Number one, you get that impression of like, what did I do wrong? I mean, and then, you start going through your head, what did I do wrong? And then another thing that happens is you kind of you as a parent, you have to be defensive at times, because whenever you're made to feel that way, you have to be like, no, like this isn't me. Like Jennifer said, it wasn't like that Jacob was, there was no difference in the labor, there was no difference in the carrying the carrying Jacob, no substance abuse or use or anything like that during the pregnancy. But at the same time, you feel like, what are they accusing me of? And then you deal with this, and it is my fault. And that's a bad place to put parents, because you do, as a parent, just want, even when I got hostile with that teacher, it wasn't so much I was mad at that teacher, it was I wanted the best for Jacob. And to get that, I wanted to make sure that I had full attention, because it's like, we're talking about my son, we're not just talking about, either whether it be like a number, we're not talking about a label, we're not talking about even just like the name Jacob. We're talking about somebody that is my son. So I do want your attention right now. I'm sorry that you got to stay a little bit late. Trust me, I don't want to be here either. But at the same time, I want to make sure that he's getting everything that he needs to be successful. And
yeah,
that can be a dangerous thing whenever you put a parent in that corner. And I've seen it. I know that you've seen it, because working how you do, where you get these parents that are just, and what I mean by dangerous is the parent will eventually just give up, because they're like, there's nothing I can do. The school take care of it. And meanwhile, the school isn't getting that push to do things more. And it's just dangerous for the kid, in my opinion.
Yeah, and you just said a statement that is such a huge statement. Um, and it's, for some reason, it's like it's making me want to cry. But you said the teacher didn't want to be there. You don't want to be there either. You're there
Right.
because your child needs you to be there. Your
Right.
child needs you to amplify their voice, or in some cases, be their voice. But teachers choose to be a teacher.
Right.
Yeah, maybe they didn't choose to be a teacher that stays after school for this one particular meeting or however many IEP meetings they have, but to that, like, that is just a huge statement, I think, for you to say that. Like, I don't want to be here either.
Right.
I would much rather that number 5 is like numbers 1 through 4 and could learn the same way as everybody else in your classroom and could sit the way that you want him to sit and could behave the way that you want him to behave. Um, so that's just, that touched my heart big time. um,
And I'm glad it did, and I'm sure that there's a ton of parents out there that feel exactly that same, and they want to scream that, but like I said, you got to remain professional, so you can't.
yeah. Well, I don't think you have to scream it, but I think it might be important to say sometimes is like, look, I don't want to be here either.
Right.
I didn't choose to be here.
Yeah,
Right.
You know, maybe that is something that needs to be said to school staff, because I wonder how many of them think about that.
yeah,
Yeah.
and it's actually great that you say that, because I think that's really important that a lot of teachers don't take into consideration is where what is this kid dealing with when he goes home, and whenever he goes home and he's got these services, I guess kind of like how are they being pushed further at home, and when a teacher says, gives that impression of they don't want to be there, you might be dealing with a parent that not only doesn't want to be there because they just don't want to be there, because, like, we don't want to be there because, like you said, we want Jacob to not have these issues, but there's some parents out there that don't want to be there because they feel like they have better things to do, whether it's go, I whatever parents do, I don't know, like whatever they're gonna go do. But whenever a teacher's not there to push the parent to like be more involved, I think that it could be another one of those things that's real dangerous, because now you're just going to push the parent away, and then when the parent gets pushed away, the kid, like you said, that maybe the kid's asking these questions or not wanting to be involved, and so the school is just kind of going with it, and next thing you know, your kid's failing classes and nobody's there to push for better services. I think it could just be like a snowball.
Effect. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that that happens too often, actually. That the school doesn't have someone pushing back at them, and not that the schools are doing anything wrong on purpose, but sometimes it takes some pushback to think outside the box and look at things a little bit differently and say, oh, well, I hadn't thought about that we could provide this in this manner, or oh, I hadn't thought about that. That could be how we teach or how we provide a service or whatever it is, because they're just used to doing things a certain way. And so sometimes just rattling the cage a little bit to get them thinking differently is not welcomed but is needed.
Right.
Yeah, I think it's not welcomed, and then at the same time, I feel like there's some cages that you just can't rattle, and that could lead me into my other son, Zachary. Um, so my son Zachary, he had an IEP for year and a half,
Yeah.
year and a half. Essentially, he was failing his classes. He would get in trouble every single day at school, and this is what, fifth grade,
This is fifth grade.
fifth
Yeah.
grade. Getting in trouble every single day at school. He just gave a lot of pushback. He just was not falling in that box that is there for the school.
Mm-hmm.
And so we got the IEP. We tried for accommodations, and they just weren't doing it. So we decided that, okay, we got to do something, because the cage being rattled isn't enough. He's still failing. We're still getting in trouble all the time. So I guess we took extreme measures. Some might consider that this to be extreme, but like we essentially found we reached out to a Missouri Military Academy, and we sent Zach there for 2.5 years, and it was funny because he did great there. There was no there they didn't even have an IEP because it was a private school. It was just a matter of the teachers and the staff and everybody kind of got around him and realized that he has to learn different and things along those lines. And so, kind of what I'm getting at there is like sometimes the school needs to change their view so much that I don't think they will. So you might have to take extreme measures to just do what you know is best for your kid. And that was an example of that. And now Zachary is back and started going to the local high school and everything. And I mean, thus far he's doing fine. It's just a matter of maybe he wasn't mature enough, maybe he was bored. I mean, you could go on forever giving excuses as to why he was acting up and not doing good. But yeah, we tried to do the IEP with him, and then the school just I don't want to talk bad about the school or anything, but at the same time they didn't uh, they didn't conform enough, I guess, to his needs as to what he needed. I'll give you.
Yeah, and I really kind of let you didn't say it in these words, but I think this was what you were saying was when Zach got to the military school, they learned Zach
Yeah,
because you said they kind of got around him and they realized that he learned differently than some of their other students, and I think that's it, is that in many cases that's what we have to do as educators. And I understand that it's harder, when you have 20, 30, 40, 180, whatever number of students you have, to really get to know every student. But on sort of the flip side of that, you don't need to really learn every student's learning style, because as I've said before, and I'm not sure if it was in this episode, that there's a percentage of kids that we reach. Just as teachers in general, there's that statistics that we were mentioning before, and then there's going to be those kids that you don't reach in that big large group, and it's those kids that you might need to learn in order to be able to reach them and teach them in the way that they learn best. And so, it isn't that you have to get to know all 180 of your students. Maybe you get to know 10 of them and learn their way to learn. But that's my opinion. I've never had 180 students at a time in a class in a year, so maybe I'm making it too simplistic. I don't know. But we just have a couple of minutes left. This hour has flown by, and I so appreciate both of you joining me today. But I just want to make sure that you get to say what you hoped to be able to say today. So is there anything that you haven't said that you want to say?
I can just say that if you anytime you go to your son or daughter's IEP meeting, make sure you advocate, ask lots of questions, ask others that have been in the same shoes, reach out to Shelly, you're a very great resource. That's the biggest, is having support and knowing who to reach out to for your child to get the best resources that they need.
Yeah. And I think, I think something that's really important is I know that there's going to be parents that are dealing with the same exact thing that we dealt with whenever Jacob was young, where we're dealing with this. Oh my gosh, does he understand what I'm saying? Is he ever going to be able to talk? And we still do. We still question, is Jacob someone that is going to need help for, ever, and things like that. But kind of going to that, with him like learning to talk like that that gives you that should give you hope in the sense that like there's a great chance that everything is going to be perfectly fine and the kid's going to be perfectly fine and everything will be perfectly fine. Essentially, you can't give up. You have to just kind of keep pushing, and there's going to be very aggravating times. I mean, I could go on for another hour about the times that we were at like stores and Jacob would have meltdowns and everybody's staring at you and you're like, I'm sorry, I'm doing what I can. I mean, I can't muzzle the kid, I mean, you just you got to learn as a parent to just kind of forget about that, and I guess almost like tunnel vision on the fact that big deal. He's screaming in Walmart. It's better than like some of the people that scream at people in Walmart, you know, and things like that. So,
Yeah, the perspective.
if he's having a meltdown somewhere, it's not the end of the world, and just kind of always remember that every way that you react is what he's watching and learning how to react. So if he's having this meltdown and you start having the meltdown, of course he's gonna be like, well, everybody melts down in my world, so I might as well melt down.
Right.
Just keeping a cool head and knowing that you know, there is hope. It's not hopeless. And then like Jennifer said, you know, with the IEP, you just gotta muscle through it, find all the information you can, find someone great like, you know, Shelly, who's really, you know, does know a lot about IEPs and can be that person that you could be like, hey, you know, I need to know, is this right, and that type of things. But I think that was the thing that I want to get across to any parent that's dealing with what we dealt with, was just stay the course and, you know, just keep at it, don't give up, and the kid won't give up, hopefully.
Yeah. And I promised my audience I did not pay them to say to contact me. So
No,
that was totally them. That was their
Wait a second, we're not going to check?
No, sorry, not that check's blank.
No, and I can attest to that too for your audience. You know, like yeah, so with Shelly, you know, I speak highly about Shelly at any meeting I go to where it's IEPs are brought up, because she is just she's a great resource, and there's people that are, you know, just specialists in things. You know, if I wanted to get heart surgery, I'm not going to go to a foot doctor, I'm going to go to a heart surgeon. And this is one of those things where this is your specialty. So obviously,
and you're great at what you do.
If you need this worked on, you know, you want to reach out to that specialist.
Well, thank you very much. That means a lot, and I feel like I'm turning red. I don't know if I am, but but I do appreciate those very kind words. And I appreciate the two of you coming on and giving of your time today and sharing your experiences, because I do think you're the first ones to really talk about the whole special education process, and, you know, the limits that were kind of in front of you that you've busted through, and not those for just yourself, but for your children. I mean, you had 2 children that have had IEPs, and it is a learning curve for everyone. And you have 3 on IEPs. Okay.
Yeah, we didn't get a chance to talk about it.
Okay. Well, maybe instead of 5 years, we'll have you come back a little sooner so we can talk about the 3rd one. But yeah, I so appreciate your time, and
absolutely,
I appreciate all the support that both of you have given me over the years, and I hope that continues and we continue to have a great relationship. And I keep an eye on Jacob.
Yeah.
So thanks everyone for joining us, and be sure to join me next week on #NoLimits. Bye-bye.